Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Energy News Beat podcast. Stu Turley, I'm the president and CEO of the Sandstone Group. And I got not only an action-packed podcast for you today, I got one of the legends, one of my heroes. He's a legend, not only in my mind, but a legend in his own mind. Mark LaCour, he has been in the business for over 25 years. He is the founder of OGGN. He's a podcast aficionado and has a herd of podcasts going with him. Mark, welcome, and I'm thrilled to have you stop by.
Stu, so happy that you invited me here. We're gonna have some fun today.
Oh, not only fun, you and I are tag teaming next week in the InVarus event next week in Houston.
Yeah, and this is the first time that they've actually had a media section. So big shout out to our buddy John. And we're gonna have part of our crew there. We're gonna have video cameras set up. We're gonna have a bunch of gear, audio gear. If you're out there and you're looking to be interviewed on a podcast, come find one of my people. And if it makes sense, we'll do it. And then other than that, if you're a podcaster and you show up there, you can come borrow our gear. We want to really blow this up for Nevers and really showcase what the oil and gas podcasting community can do.
Oh, and when you and I've been following you for years. And so it is so nice that you and I have interacted on social and getting to see that. Mark, tell us a little bit of your history. You've had a lot of experience in the oil and gas space, but tell us your path.
Yeah, I'll try to make it short because it's not. So about 25 years ago, I needed a job and I just happened to know people at the phone company in the East, which was Bell South. And I go, look, I'm just looking for a good sales gig. And they go, Mark, we got the perfect gig for you. But we're going to warn you ahead of time. It's had declining revenue for almost 30 years and no other salesperson wants this group of clients. And I go, I'll take it. Because honestly, Stu, I just wanted the job. What I didn't know is that Bell South gave me their entire oil and gas book of business. So every oil and gas company that operated from the Texas, Louisiana line to Florida up to Virginia, if you make that big soup, was all of a sudden mine. And I knew nothing about oil and gas. In fact, the only thing I knew about oil and gas was oil went into the motor to keep it running and gasoline went to tank so that it would burn, right?
Right.
And it was actually a blessing. So at one time I got to see the entire industry and within 15 minutes I go, oh, these guys get it out the ground. These guys move it. These guys turn it to stuff you can sell. And these companies do all the work that nobody else wants to do. So it just made sense to me. And I love that experience. During Katrina, I won Vendor of the Year award with Chevron. At that time, it was nothing about sales or business. It was on handshakes because it was an incredible catastrophe in that part of the state. Right. And you can't run a refinery without connectivity. And so we did everything we could to get connectivity up so we get the refineries back up so we get fuel flowing. That led me to a company called Forrester Research, where I had their oil and gas key accounts. And please, Forrester, no hate mail for this, but about 12 years ago, they capped my commission and it just pissed me off. So I started my own company, Modal Point, out of anger. Right. And Modal Point's a market research company. It's still around, focused on oil and gas. And in the process of growing that business about 8 years ago, my marketing guy came to me and said, hey, we should start a podcast. And I looked at him, Stu, and I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard come out of your mouth. Nobody listens to those damn things. Because if you remember back then, there was no app, right? You had to understand how to download an MP3 file. Right. Connectivity was not all over the place, so you couldn't do remote recordings. You had to learn how to use either a free tool to edit or buy very expensive software. And it was a pain in the butt.
Right.
And Stu, have you ever had somebody bug you to the point that you say yes, just so they'll shut up and leave you alone?
Yes, I have done that, Mark. And I'm going to be honest, I recorded them and then I did not publish it.
So for me, my marketing guy kept on and on about the podcast. And eventually he just wore me out. And I said yes, just so he'd shut up. And what I didn't know is we started the first oil and gas podcast in the world. 3 months into it, Red Wing Boots called me and they go, hey, we want to sponsor your show. And Stu almost said why, but the old sales guy me kicked in and said, shut up, let them talk. And that's the beginning of this empire that we're sitting on now. So I would love to say I was that smart. Honestly, in the very beginning, it was just luck. But the moment I noticed that the industry flocked toward podcast, right, because we had a new younger workforce coming in, I realized, hey, there's something powerful here. And it's something that not only can we help educate and entertain our industry, but we can also help educate the world on the benefits of the hydrocarbon industry, right? We
Right.
catch so much bad press out there that somebody needs to be the voice of reason. And I'm not talking politics or opinions, I'm talking just facts. So we make money at it. We have a good time. Our sponsors love us, but at the same time, we're trying to educate the world into the value of the oil and gas industry. And right now, with everybody complaining at the pump, it's a good time to help educate the world around stuff like that.
Oh, isn't it funny? It is just a nutcase. We'll go into some of that here in a bit. But Mark, your formula has been successful. I mean, you have generated the pool of podcasts. You've got great events going on. You got all these things going on, and then you have the sponsorships. I'm going to be honest with you. I tried sponsorships and they didn't work. But then I did not have the formula. So I've been doing podcasts and just enjoying it. And I'm going to tell you one thing, Mark, it never dawned on me. I was in a shopping center and a guy said, "Hey, what do you do?" I didn't want to tell him that I was like a financial nerd, and all that kind of stuff. And he goes, "I'm a podcast host." Really? Go figure that out. But what is your formula? How did you decide, besides Red Wing, where did you go from Red Wing to the Bomb and the Herd you got?
Yeah, so our sponsors tend to be big companies you've heard of: Amazon, IBM, Hewlett Packard, United Airlines, Technip FMC, blah, blah, blah. And the formula is actually really, really simple. It's the execution that gets hard, but the formula is simple in that if you think about what a podcast is natively, it is literally education through storytelling. And it's a piece of content that people can consume when they're doing something else, such as commuting or working out. So it allows basically people to double task when they're doing something that's kind of mundane. They can learn and be entertained through a podcast.
Right.
And so what we've learned is there's a bunch of misconceptions in the world around big companies in oil and gas that we can help fix. Let me give you a perfect example.
Okay.
IBM is one of our sponsors. Our flagship show is sponsored by them. They've been friends of us for pretty close to a decade now.
Right.
IBM has not built a laptop in over 20 years. Yet a lot of people in oil and gas still think they make laptops, right? which they don't. So,
didn't they sell that off to Lenovo? Or
they sold all that off, right? So now they're like an Accenture. They're a think tank, but with IBM's history and domain expertise. In IBM's oil and gas sales team, they have oil and gas project managers, petroleum engineers, geophysicists. They have oil and gas people that work there. They understand the technology, but they needed help understanding the domain expertise of oil and gas, which they have. But how do you communicate that to the world? One of the best ways to do it's with the podcast. So all we don't do commercials, right? We don't sell advertising spaces. All we do is talk about how IBM, if you need a hybrid cloud solution, IBM's the person to go talk to that. If you're worried about cybersecurity, go talk to IBM. And our audiences hear it and they go, "Oh, I didn't know IBM did that." And they reach out and sales eventually naturally follow. And if you look at all of our sponsors, they fit that same model. Amazon, a lot of people in oil and gas think they're just a brown box delivery company. They have no idea about Amazon Web Services, much less Amazon Energy Services inside AWS. So that's the model. Very simple. Now, here's where it gets hard. Try to find the right person in a big company like Microsoft or IBM or United Airlines that realizes they need to do something different, but they don't know what it is. Until you find that person, you're not going to have a good conversation about working together with a podcast. But when you find that person, then it's easy. The sales cycle's short. They get it right away. The results are relatively quick. So it's a win-win all the way around.
Well, do you think age, and I'm going to, I'm a lot older than you because I can say I'm like me and Moses were buddies, but do you think the younger generation comes in and gets it and makes it a little easier for you to talk to them?
100%. So when I look at how hard it was to sell sponsorships, even say 5 years ago versus now, night and day. Quite honestly, I don't sell sponsorships anymore. They all come into us. They didn't in the beginning, right? But to your point, this new younger workforce knows the value of the podcast. Why? Because they consume them, they listen to them, they inherently know the value. I'll tell you something really funny, Stu, and I don't think you're that much older than me. I'm 50, I'll be 57 in May. But as a podcaster, you can see the devices that people listen to your podcast on, and almost 100% of it's mobile, not us. We have about 5%, which is a big number, that listen to it on desktops, which means there's probably older people in our industry that don't understand how to listen to it on their phones. So they sit in front of their computer and listen to the podcast, right? And that number gets smaller every year as this younger workforce makes bigger inroads into our industry.
Right. Well, I found a different formula because I go at it from a different way. And that is the formula I use is get fun people on the podcast that are legends in their own mind. Kidding, like us. And then we take that thought leadership, drive it to a website, we fan it to all the socials and do YouTube and video. And that gets the old guys, because the old guys will sit there and go, oh, I'll watch a YouTube. And so that we try to get both everybody on there. And that seems to have helped our growth.
Hey, Stu, I'm gonna let you and your audiences in on a secret. Nobody else in the world knows what I'm about to tell you right now. So you and your audiences have to keep this quiet for a couple months.
Okay.
Speaking of older people in our industry, we're launching a fellows podcast. We're going to get, and if your audience doesn't know what a fellow is, in our industry, there's this term, fellows or gray beards. And these are the people that have done this work for 20, 25, 30 years. Right. They've forgotten more about subsea installations than the new guys will ever learn. Right. We're going to go out, Stu, and capture that and record it and have all that domain expertise and that knowledge and that thought leadership, record it for posterity. So all of your audience, keep that quiet. Don't let anybody else know that we're doing that, but it's coming.
That secret is between us and Channel 5 News. No, that is fabulous, because that's the same kind of thing, Mark, that's going on with the World War II vets. We're losing all of them. We're losing the Vietnam vets. We're losing all those. And I see the other folks doing that. We're also losing the old school oil.
Yeah. And, Stu, it's kind of scary. So last year, in the summer of last year, I was out in Midland and we're at a job site. They were actually drilling. And we had our protective gear, and all of a sudden we heard clang, 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 and we all ran except the young new guy. All of us knew that means somebody dropped a wrench, and we knew to get out of the way because we've done this for 25 years. The new guy just looked up, and it struck me. And it's like, holy shit, this guy he literally is a Harvard MBA, super smart, but he didn't grow up in the field. He doesn't know what a torque wrench is. He doesn't know what chains are. And so even though he's super educated and knows more about business than I'll ever learn, he has no firsthand experience. And I'm worried about that. This new workforce that's coming in didn't grow up on farms or working on trucks or tractors or, putting bush hogs in the back, none of that stuff. And don't get me wrong, this new workforce is awesome, but I am a little bit concerned about our future safety metrics.
Oh, I think you're dead on right. And when, even in doing radio towers that I did, whenever you hear that clang, 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 you step closer to the radio tower because it's going to bounce out or it's going to bounce in. You got to know where to step.
Yeah. You ever do a hot tower jump where you have to stand on the rubber pad like an AM tower and you got to jump to the tower because you'll fry yourself? When I think about that now, it's like, that is crazy that people used to do that.
Oh, no, but I did have to get certified for tower rescue because I was out there and, here I am, I'm an old guy and I had to rappel off holding a guy to my back. That instructor was brave.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a different world. It's funny. I didn't even know you had that experience. I touched that world 2 years ago.
Oh, cool. Yeah, my wife, I did a pictures up there and everything else. And I said, hey, I'm here for my test. She thought I was taking a number 2 pencil test. And I'm up there. She's like, I'm
slightly different.
But Mark, what do you think about, you've got your stable, you've got your industry leaders there. Where do you think the oil and gas market is going right now in the US?
That's a great question. So we're constrained right now from past decisions, both by federal politicians and state politicians, and also public sentiment. Actually, Friday, I'm addressing a bunch of students at Berkeley about high gas prices. Cool. And they are convinced that oil and gas companies are raping people. And wait till I explain to them that Exxon and Shell own no gas stations in the US, right? They don't even know that piece yet. So here, there's a huge demand. We're in this global energy shortage, which is not going away anytime soon. It was sped up by what happened with Russia and Ukraine, but it was already there. There's just a shortage of hydrocarbons on the market. And people in the industry know that you can't just turn up production overnight, that it takes years, but people outside the industry don't know that. Right. So we're in a weird place, Stu. We have this drain of talent. We have this negative public perception in the US where nobody wants to come work in our industry anymore. Right now, the demand is better than it's been in a decade. And I think we're at the beginning of a bull run for at least 10 or 15 years. I think the demand for hydrocarbons is going to stay high for at least a decade. And we also can't get parts and pieces. I don't know how many service companies I've talked to can't get pipe. And so they literally can't do jobs because they can't get parts. So where is it going to go? We're going to be busy, number one. Yep. I think public perception is already starting to happen. Is not going to be as bad, because when people pay twice as much to fill up their car at the gas station, all of a sudden they realize, hey, maybe I should revisit this oil and gas thing, right? But we're not gonna be able to hire people. We're not gonna be able to get parts. And so we're in a strange place where there's gonna be money everywhere, but we can't actually increase production for probably another year, right? And that's if all the pieces fall in place, including the choices of our politicians.
There's a couple of things that scare me to death, Mark. And that is, yesterday, JP Morgan came out and said $180 oil is within reach. Scott Sheffield said yesterday, because of the commitment to his investors, he's not going to increase his CapEx and drilling. I love Scott Sheffield, man. I mean, he is a cool cat. Now, when you sit there, you combine lack of capital, lack of commitment to increase CapEx, then you add in the geopolitical stuff that you just mentioned. Everything was heading that way. I had research showing the more we go greener, as Jay Young said, would say, we go greener. We use more fossil fuels. I don't get it. And it is going higher.
Yeah, I don't like either of those words. So first thing, fossil fuels. What people don't understand is hydrocarbons are literally legacy sunlight nurtured by Mother Earth and then given us in a very energy dense packet. The holy grail in renewables is storage. Damn it, we're storing sunlight from 1 million years ago for free in the ground. So it's not fossil fuels, it's organic fuels. It's natural.
I love that. I love that, Mark. I'm stealing that and I'm going to use that.
Yeah. And then green energy, there's always a consequence to energy. When you set up that windmill, you're removing kinetic energy from the wind. You are slowing it down, which means it's going to drop its dust and moisture earlier than it normally would. Now, is that good for us or bad for us? We don't know that yet, right? So I don't like the term green energy. It's all just energy. At some point, our sun will run out of hydrogen and it will go supernova and will bake us. That's about the time we'll run out of hydrocarbons on this earth, right? They're still being made. People don't even talk about the fact that hydrocarbons are still being made in the world's oceans, not at the same rate as the Jurassic and Pleistocene area, but they're still being made. So that's one of the perceptions that we need to get around, is that somehow hydrocarbons are fossil, or they're old, or they're dangerous. They're not. They're the most natural form of energy you could possibly find.
They're a bunch of, all the flora and everything else became oil. The dinosaurs became oil, and all of it is natural.
Yeah. And it's funny. So people give me grief sometimes about my views, and they go, what do you know about nature and wildlife? My degree's in wildlife management. I know a lot about how nature's supposed to work.
I didn't know that. Most
people don't. And Stu, the funny thing is, I've never used it my entire life. And I used to think I wasted my money. Actually, it was the Marine Corps paid for it, but I used to thought I wasted my degree. And then I'm on the board of the API Houston chapter. I'm the director of public relations. I'm the only guy that's authorized to talk to press. And about 5 years ago, somebody from the Sierra Club interviewed me about the Rigs to Reef program. And what she was trying to do is get me mad so she could get a sensational quote to demonize our industry. And I've done it for so long that she couldn't get under my skin. So finally she got upset and she stomped her foot and she goes, what do you know about wildlife? And for the first time in my entire life, I got to say, actually, I have a degree in wildlife management. And you? And she was so mad that she fact checked me, but it's true.
Well, Mark, did I hear the word Marine come out of your mouth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah.
When were you in?
82 to 87.
Congratulations and thank you. You're always a Marine, and I really appreciate you.
Yeah, a lot of people don't understand that. It's a little bit different part of the armed services. The oath that we take is lifelong. We're always first to fight. We got a little bit of a bad reputation in our own armed services, but when the chips are down, the first thing the Army and the Air Force and anybody else calls is the Marines. And Stu, I served during peacetime. I served when Ronald Reagan was in office, and it was a wonderful experience. I was a radio operator. That's where I got my tower experience from. So yeah, anybody out there, and I have a 17-year-old son that's looking at and listening to Army National Guard, and our armed services are often incredible deals for our world's young people to serve and to pay for school and everything else. So it was probably one of the best things I ever did. Now, while I was in and I was constantly cold and wet and being shot at, I didn't think it was a great career choice. But when I look backwards, it's probably one of the best things I ever did in my entire life.
Yep. I would agree, Mark. All the Marines that I've got very dear friends that are Marines. I'm a Marine wannabe. I should have gone in, but I'll tell you what, you know what the best security you can have for your car and your home is?
What?
A Marine decal. There is not anybody that doesn't understand that if they touch a hair on anybody in that family, 5,000 guys will show up on your doorstep with one phone call.
Yep, it's a brotherhood. It still is a brotherhood. When I meet young Marines who are just getting out, we have something in common that's hard to explain to the general person, right? We've all stood on those yellow footsteps. You know, we've all drank water we should probably not have drinking. We've all been forced to exercise to the point of puking. You know,
Yep.
you know, we've had close friends die in front of us, and that brings a group of people together like nothing else. Those shared experiences. And so it's like I said, it's probably one of the best things I've ever done in my entire life was do my service in the Marine Corps.
Well, thank you again. But you know what's that? There's a strong correlation with that in the oil field. And
100% for the same
the
reasons.
the oil field guys have a bond. I mean, I love the power, and we're a sponsor of Energy Strong. And I absolutely love what Dustin has done with Energy Strong and getting that out there. And Mark, your belief in educating people correctly about the oil and gas space is critical. It's not done enough.
It's not. And you know, I'll right now, I'm going to call out the super majors, Exxon and Shell and BP and Chevron and
Right.
Total. Y'all need to do a better job of educating the public about what you do day to day. Let me give you a perfect example. I don't know if you've been to the Exxon campus at any time, but when they first bought that land and they grubbed it, they saved about half of those wild trees. They put them in cold storage. They spent millions of dollars keeping those trees alive for 3 years while they built that campus.
Right.
And when it was time to landscape, they replanted the trees. And I'm like, Exxon, you need to tell the story to the world. And they go, no, we're not trying to brag. I go, it's not bragging. It's people think you're destroying the planet. Your own employees sometimes think you're destroying the planet. And yet you do stuff like this and you don't talk about it. You know, Technique FMC's builds schools in Nigeria to educate these poor kids. Chevron spends more money fighting AIDS than any government or non-government organization out there. Exxon's doing the same thing, fighting malaria, and we never talk about the good that we do for civilization. And so I'm gonna try to, myself and OGM, we're trying to be that voice to get those good stories out there. But I challenge the super majors, quit doing your big theatrical releases and start letting your own employees talk to their neighbors about the good work that you do for society.
What's up? And I'm going to ask this: what's up with their hypocritical? They go when BP says we're now an energy company, with Total says we're now an energy company, we're going green, but yet they're going to fund it with all of their oil and gas profits. I don't get it, but you know,
there's a couple of things going on. So quite honestly, when BP changed its name to Beyond Petroleum, that was a marketing stunt, whether they want to admit it or not, right? This was a while ago. And so the first wave of being green or looking at investing in renewables by the super majors, especially, a lot of it was marketing to keep their shareholder value up, right? To keep PR up.
Right.
Well, you saw what happened with Exxon and engine number one, I believe.
Yeah.
And all the other super majors that are public are also facing pushback from their shareholders. So number one, a lot of this is to keep shareholder value up. Well, if you keep your shareholders happy, your value stays up, which gives you more capital to invest in other things. But the other part of it, Stu, is they're actually saying, shoot, can we make money doing this? So let me talk a little bit about a company called Exxon, and they're doing a carbon sequestration right now in the Permian. And they just announced a big announcement in Australia. They're doing it. And you go, well, Exxon's just doing that to say they're green, to go along. And no. So one of the things that people know about carbon dioxide, one of the many uses for it is well stimulation. You inject it in a reservoir. It adds energy to the oil, which decreases the viscosity, so it doesn't stick to the rock as much, so it's easier to get out. Up until now, Exxon has to buy carbon dioxide to do carbon dioxide floods. So companies like Kinder Morgan make the carbon dioxide and sell it to Exxon. Guess how smart those guys are at Exxon? And if anybody's listening to my podcast, you know I love Exxon as an engineering and project management company, but I hate doing business with y'all. But I love you as Exxon. Listen to what Exxon's done, Stu. They're now getting governments and states to fund carbon sequestration. And what do you think they can do with that carbon dioxide? They're going to inject it into reservoirs for well stimulation. They're geniuses. We're going to pay for something that Exxon used to have to buy on the market, right? That's genius. And at the same time, if the belief about carbon dioxide affecting global temperatures, which I don't believe. I've seen no proof of it. But if that happens to be true, Exxon's also sequestered all that carbon dioxide in the reservoir as a carbonate. So it's a win-win all the way around. It's genius. I mean, it's literally genius. And they get the public relations kudos for going green.
Where was I thinking up a business model on that? I mean,
but seriously, same way with lowering carbon dioxide. The number one way the globe can lower carbon dioxide emissions is to move from coal electrical generation to natural gas, right?
Exactly.
Number one way, it drops CO2 emissions 60% immediately, no retrofitting, nothing.
Right.
Well, who do you buy the natural gas from? The Shell, the BPs, the Totals. Once again, marketing genius.
Oh yeah. Well, Mark, here's a thought that I got tickled over, and that is the Biden administration. You got to love him. I mean, he's entertainment at the finest.
At the least, he's entertainment. Yes.
But you sit back and you look at Colorado and Senate Bill 181, and you know that whole language started in Colorado. Some of it made its way into the infrastructure bill, and then when the infrastructure bill came out and said, "Oh, by the way, natural gas and nuclear available for funding under renewables." I mean, that was a stealth in there. I was trying to find people to talk about it. Everybody, and then Europe, COP26 said, "Okay, great, that language is in there too." And then the EU did it, and you gradually could hear this pop, 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 pop. It was left-wing nut jobs going around the world, and their heads were exploding when they realized that the funding, and that happened this past week. And you sit back and kind of go, the hypocrisy. You mentioned the other one, California is actually what I do you know that it was at 70% of the oil they import from the rainforest or something silly like that?
Yeah, it's literally ludicrous. So you got California. So let me back up to your audiences and to you, Stu. Have y'all ever heard of a Russian or Chinese oil spill?
No, because oh yeah, one because it was up there and it got out accidentally, and it was
actually gasoline that satellite images picked up.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So you've never heard of a Russian or Chinese oil and gas spill. That means one of two things. That means they're better at it than Americans and Europeans, or it means they don't tell. You want to guess which one it is? They don't tell. Guess. Okay. So you have California importing Russian oil when times are normal. And I love Russia, I love the people, but they don't have the same stewardship to the environment that we have. When they spill oil, they don't care. They don't clean it up. It stays there, right? Then you got our East Coast, who literally are miles away from the abundant gas fields in Pennsylvania. They're not letting them build pipelines. So what are they doing? They're importing natural gas from Europe, not from Europe, from actually Russia, but through the Caribbean in super tankers. So, and a tanker is one of the most polluting things in our world's ocean. But these East Coast people think they're helping the environment. It's the same way that the ethanol fuels. The E85 fuel, if you look at the map of the U.S., the only place you can get E85 fuel is the center of the country where the corn is grown to make the E85 fuel.
Right.
But most of the E85 vehicles that are bought on the East and West Coast, but they can't buy E85 fuel. But they think by buying an E85 vehicle, it somehow makes a difference. And it's the lack of just common sense sometimes, you know, that people just kind of need to get back to and a lot of that would help the perception of our industry if people just had some type of energy literacy.
Oh, absolutely. What do you think about, this brings up about 15 more topics. Okay, let's get fired up. What about Biden putting out last week that he wants to increase it to 15%? Isn't that going to hurt the engine and cause more miles per gallon?
Yeah. So ethanol is not a good fuel. And you'll have people push back and go, well, it's super successful in Brazil. Well, that's because you don't understand the process. In Brazil, they have sugar cane. So all they do is crush the cane. They have sweet water, right? And they ferment that with yeast and they distill it. Very simple process. Same way you make whiskey or vodka. In the US, we don't have the tropical climate to grow that much sugar cane. So we use corn. Now, corn has zero sugar in it. So you have to malt it. So they grow the corn, which takes thousands of gallons of water. Then they dry it out. Then they wet it again so it sprouts, and they dry it out again, and they grind it up, and that's where the sugar comes from. They ferment that, then they distill it. That extra step costs billions of gallons of fresh water and adds costs. So ethanol is not cost effective in the US without government subsidies, and it's not good for your engine to put on top, and you can't move it in a pipeline, right? So we need to get rid of the renewable fuel standards, which is basically a black market for legal extortion against the refineries. We need to let the market determine what fuels the American people want to run. If America wants to run all electric vehicles, great. Let the free market determine that, right? But the government, and don't get me wrong, neither side understands our industry. You have one side, political side, that hates us with a passion, like we're the devil itself, but the other side doesn't know what we do. And so there's really no middle ground of political people that understand science, energy literacy, and business. And so as an industry, we suffer because of that. But Stu, we're still here. Like we're still here.
Yes. And I transitioned my company to energy as opposed to oil and gas, because when you take a look, the regulations and the regulatory issues have been developing for years. Everything that stemmed out of Colorado SB 101 and everything into the Clean Air Act, anything that is going on in the oil and gas space is going to go to any energy. So think about this as a nightmare, and you are on track to do the United States a favor in being a true, not only carrying on your patriotism as being a Marine, but educating people about energy. You are so on track, Mark. I can't even believe it.
Well, it's still been doing this for a little while, so you would hope I can have some entertaining and intelligent conversations around these topics.
What's next for Mark? What do you got coming around the corner?
So I gave y'all one secret. I have another one I can't share with you. It's a new business line that we're launching toward the end of this year. But the other thing is just growth. Wait,
was weird. Whoa, Tex. I mean, I'm sorry. You sit there and tease us like that.
I can't. It's a new venture for us that has an investor that's a very big company, and there's a bunch of non-disclosures in place, and I don't want to violate any of that. So just wait till October, and you'll actually, Stu, as soon as I can, I'll let you know personally. Actually, once we turn the camera off, I'll let you know what we're working on, because I know you'll keep it to yourself. I'll sign an NDA. Yeah. But we're just in growth mode. So we have, I think, 14 shows as of today. We launched a new live stream, which has been an overnight success. We have, I think, 7 more podcasts in the works.
Nice.
And we're just going where
which live stream is that?
That's a OGG and Unscripted. It's once a month. It's the first Thursday of the month. It's hilarious. So we bring on very high level ranking oil and gas executives, and we have fun with them, but we tell good stories. So they're forced to play ping pong while they answer oil and gas trivia questions. There's a bar segment. So shout out to Dell for sponsoring the bar. We have a knight. So Sir Goodnight rides in with the knight helmet, and he has his flag, and the flag is sponsored by Oilfield Marketplace. So shout out to them. So he walks in Oilfield Marketplace flag, and it's just something new, right? So instead of the same old boring old guy stuffy shirt presentation about well control, we'll bring an expert on well control, and they have to talk about it while they're having a cocktail, while they're playing ping pong.
This is in Houston?
Yeah. So we shoot it live in Houston. It's always the first Thursday of the month. You hit our social, you'll find it, and it's everywhere. At the same time, it's on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, our website, Discord, Twitch, everywhere.
Oh, how fun. Do you take tickets for people to go watch live?
So here's the funny thing. Somebody asked you that last show, and I thought they were joking. And don't you know, people are willing to come sit and watch this thing live? So what we're going to do, once again, it's a secret, your audience keep this quiet, is we're going to build a small community around Unscripted. And if you're active in the community, you get to come watch it for free. Right. And the cool thing is, I mean, shout out to Mike Worth's people at Chevron, but, I'm engaged with their people trying to get Mike Worth on this show. We had John Gibson on just last week, who's like a legend in this industry. Right. Yeah. So some very smart people talking about serious subjects in a show that's not that serious.
I love it. In fact, I will bribe you to allow me to come in and at least see it live, because I'm excited.
You're more than welcome. We'll put you first on the invite list.
Oh, that'll be fun. And again, this is like I invite myself over to people for dinner. So, consider that a self thing there. So you got that, and then you got 7 more podcasts in the works
this year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we're doing some really cool stuff. We have a food and energy podcast.
A food and
energy. So the connection between energy and food. So if you had an egg this morning for breakfast, how much energy did it take to raise that chicken? How much energy did it take to move that egg? How much energy did it take to cook that egg? How much energy did it take to make the pan you cook that egg in?
Which came first, Mark? The egg or the podcast host? How do you go find these guys?
That way it gets better, Stu. Think of every business event we do, every conference, there's always food involved. There's barbecue and brisket and chili. We're going to cover all of that, and we're going to get recipes from the oil and gas industry itself, and we're going to publish a cookbook. I have not publicized this at all. Well, I guess now I have to your audience, but we already have some of the top ranked food bloggers in the US want to play a part in this because they've never got a chance to document food behind the oil and gas firewall. How awesome is this show going to be?
Do you sleep? This is out there, man. I mean, Do you just lay there at night and think about these kind of things?
No. Once again, I'm not that smart. One of my advantages, we're at 2.3 million listeners from 194 different countries. We basically own the space. The benefit of that is our own listeners, literally every day, we have between 10 and 50 people reach out every single day and say, hey, Mark, can you do a podcast on pipelines or oil and gas finance or through tubing services? And we keep track of the top 20 because we know there's a demand. Number one this year is hydrogen. That came out of nowhere. 3 years ago, hydrogen didn't even make the list. Number two is diversity and inclusion. Once again, that didn't even make the list 5 years ago. So our own audiences tell us what they want to hear. And then as sponsors reach out to us, we try to fit them and match them up. So for the food and beverage one, for the food and energy one, that's a hard one because I need to find a company that plays both in the oil and gas space and in the food and beverage space. And Stu, I found them. I found a company that does that, right?
Wow.
Yeah. So a bunch of new, fun, cool stuff coming up. We have a tuner podcast. So if you don't know what tuning is, it's hot rodding in you and my terms, right? Making your car faster than it came from the factory. Now, a lot of it's done with software and technology. And so one of the most important things about when you're hot rodding a car is the quality of the fuel is real important, right? So we have a tuner podcast to basically show how internal combustion engines last longer or work better on different types of retail fuels. Once again, how cool is that? To take a bunch of young kids that are making Celicas faster than they're supposed to be from the factory, at the same time showing the advantages of the detergents and the gasoline for direct injection engines. Just stunned. Awesome stuff.
I am stunned. How cool is this? So I'll tell you, I am so excited. And there's a couple things, Mark. A, for your time, and B, for just really being an industry leader and taking people under your wing and teach them. Because this bond that's in the oil and gas field and the bond of podcasters is a hoot. So again, thank you very much. And I am so excited to get to see you next week. And we are going to have an absolute blast.
Yeah, you and I are getting on the microphone. Maybe you can turn the video cameras, and we're going to continue this conversation. So, to your audience, whenever we get that recorded and edited, I'll get you a link so your audience can see us in person. Because here's the cool thing: I feel like I've known Stu. We've never met in person. Never. This will be our first time.
But you know what's fun is we follow each other. I follow you, and we've even had some bantering on some of those things back and forth. I was like, it's the Mark LaCour.
Dude, stop it. I don't think of myself as that guy.
Thank you very much for stopping by. And we are going to have a great time next week.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thanks.